Your portrayal of Kevin McCarthy, I found fascinating. It's kind of a character study as you watch. And again, I think some of us know, Kevin McCarthy, waffled and weaseled and, said one thing in public and then did something else. I mean, that pattern has been there. But so give me what do you think about Kevin McCarthy today, particularly the trajectory of his career? The guy who knew that Trump lost the election, knew that Trump's legal arguments were bullshit, knew that in fact he had played a negative role on that he had incited the riots on January 6th, goes down to Mar-a-Lago, feeds him, nurses him back to health, becomes the speaker, and is ousted in this humiliating fashion. What do you think about Kevin? Just give me your Kevin McCarthy take.
Well, I think that he's a pathetic figure in many ways in our history, but I also think it's important not to minimize the damage that he did, because even though he's somebody who didn't seem to have strong ideological beliefs, he was leading the Republicans in the House, and at each moment when his determination to do the right thing could have made a difference, he determined instead to do the wrong thing. And, so I talk in the book, for example, about the whole process of objecting to electoral votes. And we'd obviously gone through a huge debate internally about it. But once the violence happened, I obviously made clear that I believed it was unconstitutional to object. And I certainly assumed that in the hours after the attack on the Capitol, there would not be a continuation of the objections. And in fact, that's what Kevin told me. He was not going to continue the objections, but then he did. And it's just an example where there are these moments where, because he was the leader, had he done the right thing, he could have taken a lot of people with him. And instead, he sort of led the conference again and again and again down this path where, it ended up with Donald Trump maintaining a real grip on a conference that was dependent on him, particularly for campaign money.
I'll give you like a little rapid fire, people who play a major role in this. Elise Stefanik. What happened to Elise Stefanik?
Well, I mean, everybody who knew Elise when she seemed to be guided by some level of principle back in the Bush administration asks themselves that question. What really surprised me was the fact that on the call on January 4th that I was listening in on, I'd been invited to this call. I'm not sure that the Trump folks remembered that I was on their distribution list. But as they were describing on January 4th, the process by which Pence, according to them, was going to reject legitimate electors, Jason Miller said, well, this support for this plan goes all the way from Jim Jordan to Elise Stefanik in the House. Now,
quite a spectrum, right?
Right. Narrow spectrum. But it did, sort of, my ears perked up thinking, well, wait a minute, is Elise in on this? Why is he mentioning Elise in particular? And I don't know the answer to that. But I think, she's somebody who very clearly is not guided by principle anymore.
So I was very curious reading the book because there's a lot in this book about the role that Mike Johnson played in that completely bogus amicus brief that would have thrown out tens of millions of American votes. And you're quite critical of the role that he played, that he knew that it was proper, or he should have known that it was, legally bogus.
He knew. Yeah.
That he engaged in what you describe as bait and switch. He then misled the members, telling them that they were signing on to something different. Did you write that after were you able to get that in after he became speaker, or was this in the book before he became the fifth string speaker of the House?
No, it was all in there before. I had to turn the book in for final printing on September 1st. And I spent so much time talking about Mike Johnson that, over before he became speaker, because I was so troubled by what I had seen and troubled by the destructive role.
Yeah, it's a devastating. So, what does it say that he has gone on to be the Speaker of the House of Representatives. I mean, what were you thinking as you watch? You were writing about, Jim Jordan, who is one of the worst players, who again becomes nominated to be Speaker, and then Mike Johnson, who played one of the most dishonest, disreputable roles in the attempt to overthrow the election, and now he's Speaker. What was your reaction? What does that say about the Republican conference?
Several things. I think, first of all, by the time the vote came around in which Johnson was elected Speaker, I think the Republicans were exhausted. Obviously, it had been really, but I don't remember exactly how many days, but they'd been through really humiliating process of not being able to name a Speaker. So I think there was exhaustion. I also think that there were many members who did not know Mike's history with respect to these issues, who didn't understand some of the positions that he's taken on policy issues. So the fact that he was also relatively unknown, I think, made him acceptable to people that I suspect, will come to regret that they supported him. And I think it's clarifying, and it's clarifying in a negative way, but it's clarifying in the sense that this is the person that the Republicans have entrusted with the speakership. Speaker of the House is the second in line to the presidency, behind the vice president. And we know without question that you cannot count on this group of people led by Mike Johnson to defend the Constitution. And I think it makes very clear how important it is that he not be the Speaker on January 6th of 2025, when the next electoral votes will be counted, when you could potentially have the presidential election thrown into the House. But it makes clear the task there as well.